Disclaimer: watch at your own risk. Tonight, we drift into the darkest corners of human history. On May 20th, 1998, in Donglu village in China's Shandong province, there was a house inhabited by the Wang family. The men of the family had left the village to work in the cities, leaving behind two sisters, 33-year-old Wang Ernie and 20-year-old Wang Zhuyun, and their 60-year-old mother, Gao Jianfeng. A fellow villager walked by the house and thought it was odd that the family hadn't awoken. So he walked up to the house and looked through the windows, and to his horror, he discovered two dead bodies. The police arrived, and the crime scene was truly horrific. Blood had stained all the walls, and there were two naked bodies found in the house, belonging to Wang Ernie and Wang Zhuyun, with their bodies identified by their fellow villagers. Wang Zhuyun had been killed by a single blunt wound to the back of the skull. Wang Ernie had suffered a much worse fate. Her hands were tied behind her back with an electric wire. The killer had bludgeoned her face in leaving identification difficult. An autopsy showed that she had been raped, and sperm samples were recovered. The police searched the entire house, but only found the bodies of the two sisters. As mentioned, their brothers were away working in the cities, but their mother, Gao Jianfeng, according to the villagers, she never left. This presented a problem, since when the police investigated every little corner of the home, she was nowhere to be found. Although her body hadn't been located, the police did not have high hopes that Zhao was still alive. The police conducted an extensive search effort to try and locate Zhao's body. The police found a small makeshift cottage outside the village, and the police entered the building. When inside, the police found one room in particular was locked, and a trail of blood led from the cottage to the door. The police now had the faintest of hopes that Zhao was still alive and being kept prisoner inside that cottage. This hope didn't last long, as after the police broke down the cottage door, they were treated to another horrific crime scene. Zhao was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and blood splattered against the walls. She had been repeatedly hit on the head with a blunt instrument. Unlike her two daughters, Zhao was fully clothed. An autopsy conducted on all three placed their time of death at 8:10 p.m. on May 19th. After Wang Ernie and Wang Zhuyun were murdered, the killer brought Zhao to the cottage, where he killed her away from the others. While investigating, the police found 3 partial and bloody footprints, and comparisons proved that they did not belong to any of the victims. The killer had purposefully disrupted and ruined the pattern of the footprints, severely degrading any evidentiary value. The police could not use this footprint to determine any information about the killer, such as height. Meanwhile, various tools could be considered the murder weapon, including hose, irons, floor tiles, and other blunt objects. The murderer had wiped down most of the weapons, and thus only one partial index fingerprint was found. The weapon the fingerprint was found on was the iron, so the police ruled on that being the murder weapon. The only biological trace of the killer was a sperm spot found on Wang Ernie's foot. But in 1998, China's DNA technology wasn't advanced enough to test it. The case became the most known and talked about in the region, and based on the brutality and tampering with the crime scene, many feared the killer would strike again. Due to this, the Shandong Provincial Police issued the local police with a deadline ordering them to solve the case in a certain amount of time, or else they'd face consequences. With no leads to speak of, and in order to solve the case, or else, a wrongful arrest was practically destined to happen. The police spent hours going through the crime scene to try and find any details they may have missed. The bedrooms looked completely turned over, as if the killer was looking for something. So, in spite of the excessive brutality shown by the killer, the motive shifted to possible robbery. The police reinvestigated the cottage and found something in the corner of the room that they had initially missed. The police found a pile of ashes with some burnt pieces of paper inside the ashes. The papers belonged to the family's accounting book, which held 50,000 yuan in deposit. This perplexed the police, since they couldn't figure out why the killer would steal their accounting book just to burn it, rather than steal the substantial amount of money that was on it. The police then remembered that Wang Ernie was killed, especially brutally, with her face left largely unidentifiable. She was also the only victim to be raped. The police then decided to go with the theory that Wang Ernie was the main target and that she had been the victim of a crime of passion. On May 21, the police utilized sniffer dogs to see if they could track the victim's scent, and they were led to a man named the dilapidated house of a man named Yu Sanchun. The police surrounded his home and soon kicked down his door and raided his property. After a thorough sweep of the house, they quickly realized that Yu wasn't home and had likely fled. The police brought their sniffer dogs to the raid, and they quickly rushed over to one of Yu's beds and brought the police's attention to a bloodied pair of pants, which only made Yu look more guilty. The police noted several samples of writing on the walls of Yu's home, with some being written in a frantic and unintelligible manner. What was legible to the police, however, was very damp. Yu had written various writings, such "I love you," "Wang Ernie," "I hate you," "Die I live ah." The police tested the blood on the pair of pants found in Yu's room, and they were the same blood type belonging to Wang Ernie. Nonetheless, he remained the police's main suspect, and a massive manhunt was launched to find him. As it was 1998, in China surveillance cameras were rare, and the police, in order to find Yu, had to rely on distributing pictures of his face and simply asking locals in neighboring villages and towns if they had seen him. Little did they know that finding Yu would be easier than they could have ever anticipated. On May 22nd, Yu simply walked back into Donglu village, and when his fellow villagers saw him, he was swiftly reported to the police and arrested. At the police station, Yu appeared to be in a trance state and was very haggard, seemingly not having slept in a while. The police barely even interrogated. Almost as soon as they opened their mouth, Yu was quick to confess to the 3 murders, and his description of the crime scene appeared to match the forensic evidence and the police's own version of events. So, it came as a shock to everyone, even Yu himself, when the deputy police director of the county police, Lu Weidong, ordered Yu to be released and told everyone that he was not the murderer. So with how ironclad the case against him was, what evidence could there have been proving his innocence? The first discrepancy was that in his confession, Yu claimed to have strangled them to death. This was simply not accurate. As already established, all 3 were killed via blunt force trauma, with no strangulation or ligature marks left on their neck. And although the fingerprint found on the murder weapon was only partial, enough of it was still preserved to compare it to Yu's fingerprint. The results came back not a match. During a third interrogation, Yu broke down into tears and retracted his confession. He claimed that he went to their home to see Wang Ernie, only to discover their body. He rushed into the house and got very to her body, which is where the blood came from. Yu then ran home and changed his pants before escaping with Yu, fearing that the police would suspect him. He only returned home to the village to eat and sleep, as his escape was unplanned, and he brought no food, clothes, or supplies with him. As for why he confessed, Yu said that because Wang Ernie, who he claimed to love, was dead, his family was destitute, and everyone already believed him to be the murderer, he figured he might as well confess, be given a death sentence, and be executed, so his family would get some insurance, and compensation to live off of. Even this confession had its flaw. Due to evidence showing he may have been innocent, the police continued to investigate and discovered that Yu had an alibi, as many villagers attested to Yu eating bowls of noodles at their homes when the crime took place. The police searched Yu's house again and found some letters written by him, which still showed that even if he didn't kill her, he was still very much obsessed with Wang Ernie. The letters included phrases such as, "I do not want to die. I cannot help it. Goodbye, my dear Wang Ernie, and both Wu Zhongwei and I have been cheated by you." This was the first time the name Wu Zhongwei had ever come up, so the police relentlessly questioned Yu about it. Although reluctant to speak of him, according to Yu, Wu was the man who became Wang Ernie's boyfriend after a prior relationship between her and Wu had deteriorated. Although he had no reason to suspect this, Yu believed that Wang Ernie had cheated on him and was cheating on Wu as well, so when he went to try and find Wu, Wu appeared to simply take Yu's word for it and was furious and almost immediately began plotting retaliation. The police asked where Wu was from, and Wu told them that his address was in Shaoqing and he worked at a local coal mine. Since he wasn't home, they rushed to the coal mine, and his employers told the police that Wu had left on May 21 and never returned. Nobody knew where he was, and that was that. Wu remained a fugitive with no trace of his whereabouts ever being discovered. The police, without their main suspect, had to close the case and label it unsolved. In 1998, DNA testing in China was still in its infancy and unable to test the small semen samples found on Wang Ernie's body. By 2011, that was no longer the case. In December 2011, the local police submitted the samples to a DNA testing lab, and after a long wait in February 2012, the results came in. The DNA matched Wu Zhong. Unfortunately, Wu's whereabouts were still unknown, but that wasn't the case for much longer. The DNA was tested in Beijing, and the DNA found at the crime scene was a match for a man named Lai Hua, who the Beijing police already had in their database. Li was living in Shangqiu, located in Henan province, and was arrested for acts of mostly petty theft, so often that he was on a first-name basis with the local police, and said local police always knew where he was at any given time. According to them, he was still in Shangqiu when he was arrested on March 15, 2012. He simply said in his own words that he didn't do anything recently, but he soon fell silent when he heard the dialect of the other officers involved in the arrest. He very easily found out where they were from and why they were there. Wu confessed soon afterwards. According to Yu was lying to make himself appear guilty or responsible again, while Yu made it seem as if Wu was living happily with Wang Ernie until he came along. Wu was actually suspicious that Wang Ernie was cheating on him long before then. Yu simply telling him just made him more suspicious. When he confronted Wang Ernie, she denied everything, and Wu was willing to let it go. But even asking her caused their relationship to deteriorate. Wang Ernie gradually ignored him and changed her mind about possibly getting married. Wang Ernie's change of heart, apparently to Wu, was all the proof he needed to come to the conclusion that Wang Ernie was cheating on him. Based on this alone, Wu prepared to kill her. He broke into the room house where Wang Zhuyun and Wang Ernie were. He grabbed the iron, hit Wang Ernie with it. When Wang Zhuyun rushed over, he hit her once and hard enough for her to fall unconscious and later die. He then proceeded to hit Wang Ernie with the iron 2 more times. When Zhao was awakened by the sounds coming from the room and rushed over. Once Wu saw her, he chased after her all the way that abandoned cottage where he bludgeoned her to death before locking her in that room and heading back to her home. Once he arrived back, he stripped the two bodies naked and tied their wrists behind their back. He then violated Wang Ernie's corpse. After Wu was done, he spent the next few minutes cleaning up the crime scene and washing away as many fingerprints and footprints as he could find. He then made his way to their bedrooms and turned the rooms over until he found the checkbook. He then brought it over to Gao's body, where he lit the book on fire in order to disguise the crime as a robbery gone wrong. Wu was brought over to the now abandoned house, where he perfectly reenacted the murder scene in a manner that matched all the psychical and forensic evidence. Wu's trial began later in 2012, where he was found guilty and sentenced to death by the Zhaojuang City People's Court. According to some sources, this sentence was carried out immediately. As rain falls softly, the cottage's bloodstains fade, a mother's cries silenced. But another bottle waits, fueling unseen fury. On January 20th, 1984, Huguette, an 18-year-old foster care runaway, stumbled out of a nondescript house in Appoigny, France, her body a canvas of horror. Swastikas had been branded into her breasts with cigarette burns dotting her thighs, and dried blood clung to her wrists where chains had held her captive for 3 months in the basement of Claude Dunan. Born in 1965 to a broken family, she'd answered a newspaper ad promising a caregiving job for Claude's mother, only to be led into a dungeon by the 48-year-old sales representative and part-time radio host. The basement's concrete walls, cold and damp, echoed with her screams that first night as Claude raped her, his hands bruising her arms, tearing at her clothes, the mattress beneath her stained with urine and blood. Over weeks, Claude and his wife, Monique, 45, a complicit homemaker, turned her into a commodity for wealthy clients who paid high rates not just for sex, but to torture. 300 francs for a cigarette burn, 1,500 for a blowtorch welt that charred her flesh, 5,000 for a night of relentless pain. Huguette recited a price list to men, businessmen, surgeons, a politician, perhaps magistrate, who whipped her until her back bled, pressed hot screwdrivers to her chest, the stench of burning skin filling the air, her body trembling as they laughed. Monique, herself abused by Claude, sometimes held the chains, her face blank as Huguette's skin blistered. The explicit brutality was unrelenting. One client carved his initials into her thigh with a knife, blood dripping as she bit her lip to stifle screams, her body racked with pain, starvation thinning her frame to near collapse. Claude's operation was a sadistic enterprise, advertised in underground magazines offering money for torment. Michaela, 22, born around 1962, answered the same ad in January 1984, lured from her foster home by promises of work. She was chained beside Huguette, her body subjected to the same horrors: rape, burns, beatings. Her screams mingling with Huguette as clients paid to slice her skin, blood pooling on the concrete. Isabelle Ringier, born circa 1960, had been ensnared earlier, promised soft BDSM, but tortured instead, her body bruised, cuts on her arms oozing as she begged for release. Isabelle escaped when Christian Grima, a client and businessman, threatened to call police, waiting outside to ensure her safety. Huguette's escape came when Claude, distracted after a client's visit, left her unchained. She pried open a basement window, her fingers bleeding from the effort, and fled into the freezing night, clutching Dunan's photos of victims, naked, bound, knives at their throats, and address books listing about 30 clients. She reached a neighbor's home, her chest heaving, burns blistering, swastika seared into her flesh, her eyes hollow from trauma. Our eyes hollow from trauma. She alerted police, but they waited 3 days until January 23rd, 1984, to raid the house, giving Claude time to vent his rage on Michaela. He beat her with a pipe, her ribs cracking, blood trickling from her mouth as she gasped, barely conscious, chained to the wall. The raid revealed a house of unspeakable cruelty. Police broke into the basement, finding Michaela barely alive, her body covered in welts. Blood caked on her legs, the air thick with the stench of decay. Chains hung from bolts, a blowtorch lay beside blood-stained screwdrivers, the mattress soaked in bodily fluids. Upstairs, Claude's office held ledgers detailing payments, 5,000 francs here, 1,500 there, and photos of Huguette and Michaela, their faces contorted in pain, some with clients' hands visible, gripping whips or blades. Jean-Pierre Lausier, the forensic doctor, examined Huguette, noting deep burns, torn vaginal tissue, and psychological scars that left her flinching a touch. Michaela needed reconstructive surgery, her ribs shattered, her skin a patchwork of scars. Isabelle, already free, later told police she wasn't blindfolded, unlike the others, and could identify clients, but investigators barely followed up. The address books, listing names like Paul Lefort, Georges Siavent, Joseph Q, and Christian Grima, held promise of exposing a network of sadists, but the case collapsed into a judicial nightmare. By 1991, only Grima faced trial, receiving a 6-month sentence, likely for aiding Isabelle's escape and threatening to expose others. Lefort and Ethevent died of heart attacks before trial, their deaths raising suspicions of suicide or worse. Joseph Q, a naval engineer, had his file dismissed by Magistrate Jacques Bourguignon, the documents vanishing. The address books, placed under seal, disappeared, with court clerk Jocelyn citing disorganized archiving. Deputy Prosecutor Stilinovic claimed a Ministry of the Interior leak tipped off clients during the raid, as media presence allowed them to evade a police trap set for January 23rd. Claude Dunant's depravity was a calculated plunge, rooted in a twisted psyche shaped by control and profit. Born around 1936, he projected respectability as a sales representative, his radio voice charming locals in Auxerre. Behind this facade, he ran a prostitution ring since at least 1980, targeting vulnerable women, foster kids, runaways, the desperate, with ads in local papers like Yon Républicain. His wife Monique, born circa 1939, was both victim and accomplice, beaten by Claude yet aiding in the torture, holding chains or cleaning blood from the basement floor. Their marriage, a toxic pact, thrived on shared cruelty. Monique's compliance bought with fear. Claude's clients, drawn from France's elite, paid for power. Men in suits who burned women's flesh, their anonymity preserved by a system that seemed to protect them. The explicit violence was systematic. Huguette endured 90 days of rape, her vagina torn from repeated assaults, burns covering 20% of her body, her screams ignored as clients paid to watch her bleed. Michaela's torture included a client pressing a blowtorch to her stomach, the skin blackening, her body convulsing as she begged for death. Isabelle's scars, less documented, included whip marks across her back, blood seeping as she was forced to kneel. The Dunant's operation wasn't impulsive. It was a business, with ledgers tracking each act, each burn, each scream. The perpetrators evaded full accountability through systemic failures and possible corruption. The 3-day delay in raiding the house allowed Claude to destroy evidence, burning photos, hiding tools, though police still recovered enough to arrest him and Monique. Claude, unrepentant, claimed the women consented, a lie debunked by their scars and testimony. Monique admitted helping but blamed Claude's abuse, her own bruises visible during interrogation. The trial in 1985 at the Auxerre Assize Court was a travesty. Claude received 7 years for rape and torture, Monique 5, both for procuring aggravated by torture. The light sentences shocked victims. Huguette, hospitalized for PTSD, wept in court. Of the 30 clients listed, only 4 were pursued, and only Grima was convicted, his 6 months a slap on the wrist. The address book's disappearance, blamed on court mismanagement, fueled rumors of a cover-up, with Stalinovic alleging elite clients were tipped off. Bourguignon's dismissal of Joseph Q.U.'s file citing insufficient evidence raised eyebrows, as did the deaths of Lefort and Ethevant, both in their 50s, from heart attacks in 1986 and 1987. No other clients faced charges, their identities buried in the lost books. The media, including Le Figaro, called it a state scandal, noting police never searched Claude's second home in Sens, where more evidence might have been hid. The unmasking, sparked by Huguette's escape, was incomplete, leaving justice half-served. Huguette's stolen photos and books forced the raid, but the system's lethargy let most perpetrators. Claude and Monique served their sentences, released by 1992, and vanished from public records, likely living quietly in France. Huguette, Michaela, and Isabelle rebuilt their lives, though Huguette's PTSD required years of therapy, her body scarred permanently. The case, dubbed the French Dutroux affair for its parallels to the Belgian child abductors' crimes, exposed elite complicity and judicial rot. No clients beyond Grima were punished, and the politician's identity, rumored to be a Paris figure, remained secret. The case spurred no major reforms, unlike Dutroux's, which tightened Belgian policing. Relief came for Huguette in seeing Claude jailed, but unease persists. How many clients still walk free? Appointees' quiet streets hide abasement screams, a nation's shame unaddressed. As rain falls softly, the chain's rust fades, victims' cries silenced. But another ad waits, luring the desperate to darkness. On August 10, 1981, the police in Shanghai, China, were called to the Jianhua Hotel. The call was prompted by the discovery of 28-year-old Li Jiahui, a man and employee of the Qingdao prosthetic factory. Li Jiahui checked into the hotel on August 8 and didn't appear to leave afterwards. Suspicions were first raised after room service received many complaints of the hotel's entire corridor having a strange odor. On the morning of August 10th, the smell had only gotten worse, so hotel staff investigated and discovered the smell coming from room 42. Using a spare key, the room was entered. The room service worker saw Li lying on his bed, and when she went to wake him, there was no response. So she instead flipped him over onto his back, where his face was paled and blood from his mouth. Li's body was actually discovered on August 8, late at night, as room service cleaned the hotel rooms daily, but just assumed Li was asleep. The only reason the hotel staff got suspicious was because he had been asleep for 2 days without changing posture. Because of the cleaning, most evidence such as footprints and fingerprints were lost, having been wiped down and cleaned. The room itself was also small, only 10-12 square meters wide and across. As the police expected, the room service heavily degraded any evidence, but the staff didn't completely wipe away everything. The police managed to lift 4 incomplete sets of fingerprints on the air conditioning unit. The police opened and took apart the AC and discovered a few wires wrapped together by black tape, a knife 21 centimeter long, a female headband with two solid metals fixed at both ends and a bill of lading for prosthetic limbs from Zhang, Shanghai Prosthetic Limbs Factory, written in Li's name. Li's body was taken away for autopsy, where the coroner noted more than a dozen light, yellowish-brown burn marks on the body, with most of them concentrated around Li's neck and back. The medical examiner came to the conclusion that all these burns were the result of repeated electric shocks, and that the cause of death was electrocution from various shocks to the chest, back, face, and neck. The time of death was placed as August 8th, the same day he checked into the hotel. Li's family in Qingdao, Shandong province, was contacted and questioned. They told the police that Li left Qingdao for Shanghai on the morning of August 8, carrying the bill from the factory and a small bag containing the following: 200 yuan cash, a pen, a bag, a bat, an aluminum lunchbox, and a Swiss-made Luo Axi brand, 17 diamonds, all steel shockproof men's watch worth more than 200 yuan. None of these items were recovered. Tragically, Li's pregnant wife fainted upon hearing of his death and later miscarried. The police believed that the killer was one of the other guests of the hotel, specifically guests staying in the same section of the hotel as Li. The police quickly found one guest that interested them the most. The guest was named Li Yiqing, and he entered the hotel with a letter of introduction from Xuanjiang in Jilin province. According to the staff, Li Yiqing was 30 years old, of medium build, and had no special facial features. He wrote his age as 40 on the hotel registration form, but according to the guests, he looked considerably younger. The Shanghai police selected some officers to travel to Jilin province to follow up on Li Yiqing. According to his document, he worked at the Xuanjiang Town Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine. The police would later find out that this hospital doesn't exist, and not one person in Xuanjiang Town was named Li Yiqing. The document and identities were a forgery. When the officers returned to Shanghai, the police investigated as many other guest houses and hotels they could find to see if he checked in else. Their efforts were all in vain. They spent 45 days in the northeastern provinces chasing leads just to be sure. The police took the electric wires left at the scene and tested them on live pigs. The wires and their shocks ended up killing the pigs in 3-4 seconds, and they used 220 volts of electricity. These wires were the murder weapon and proved once and for all that the electrocution was intentional. According to some sources, Li was the first person in Shanghai to be murdered via electric shocks. The police's most valuable piece of evidence was the 4 fingerprints found on the AC unit. The Shanghai police had the fingerprints of 400,000 convicts on file. As this was the early 80s, the police had to have a team of multiple people compare each of them manually. It took 3 months to compare all of them, and at the end of the day, none of the fingerprints were a match. But while the Shanghai police were comparing fingerprints, very similar crimes were happening outside of Shanghai. On August 26, 52-year-old Feng Xiaoan, a supply marketing purchaser of an agricultural machinery factory in Shangyu County, was staying at a small hotel in Zhejiang Province's Weitang village. While he was asleep, he was suddenly awoken by a sudden electric shock, and once he saw a man was administering the shock, he resisted, fighting back desperately. Eventually, he managed to get the man away from him and yelled for help, prompting the attacker to flee at the hospital. The police questioned Feng about what happened. Feng was sound asleep when he suddenly felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. He opened his eyes and saw a man holding an electric wire against his head. Feng threw up his hands, knocking the wire from his attacker's grip. He then shouted at the man, but he coldly and calmly ignored Feng and picked the wire back up and tried to shock him again. Instead, Feng punched the man, knocking him down to the ground, and screamed for help. Once the sound of the room service's footsteps got closer, Feng's attacker abandoned the wire and jumped out the room's window, climbed over a 2-meter low wall, and jumped into the river, where he disappeared from view. Feng was examined at the Jiaxing County Hospital and was found to be in good health. Feng said that his attacker also lived in the same room in the hotel as he did. The man did not leave the hotel during the day and slept at night. He also rarely spoke. Feng and the hotel staff did not get a clear look at the man's face, but his build and height were similar to Li Yiqing, and he spoke in the same northwestern accent as Li Yiqing. The only evidence the killer left behind at the scene was the electric wires. Once the two jurisdictions became aware of each of their cases, the Shanghai and Zhejiang provincial police began a joint investigation. The joint investigation didn't start out promising, with no new leads or suspects. On September 11, in Shangrao, located in the Jiangxi province, a man simply referred to as Yu was found dead in his hotel room on a bunk bed. The police's main suspect was his fellow guest and roommate Chen Jiwei. According to Yu's family, he had in his possession 200 yuan of cash and a Shanghai watch worth 150 yuan, none of which was found by the police. According to the hotel staff, Yu's room was booked by 3 people: Yu, Chen Jiwei, and a man surnamed Wei. The 3 men all left together to go to the theater, and the night they returned to the hotel was when Yu was killed. According to hotel staff, Chen Jiwei was 38 years old, of medium build, and spoke with a northwestern accent. A more detailed description was given by Wei and Chen. Jiwei and Li Yiqing were suspiciously. Another smoking gun was that the bag Chen Jiwei came in with was strikingly similar to Li Jiawei's. The police searched the hotel room for evidence and found a letter written by Chen which said, "Yu and Wei, commands of Shangrao Hotel Room 303. I cannot save you. Me and my family's lives are in their hands. Tonight they let me go. I do not know if you can be safe." This letter was the only evidence found. No tools, fingerprints, footprints, or anything were found. The killer made sure not to leave behind the wires this time as well. Chen's check-in form was later found to be forged. The Shangrao police were aware of the cases in Shanghai and Whitehang Village and sent the check-in form to the Shanghai police to compare handwriting samples. It was while waiting for the results that the next incident happened. On September 25th, in Zhejiang, also in Jiangxi province, a murder occurred at the Gongyong Hotel. This victim's name appears to have not been released, but he was a buyer from a clothing factory in Shaoxing, Zhejiang. He was found dead on his bed from electric shocks. His carry-on bag of 200 yuan in cash and a large number of clothing samples were taken. The victim shared his room with a man named Li Mingkun. He was registered as a staff member of Tong Glass Instrument Factory, 43 years old. A native of Heilongjiang, province of Zhejiang police, sent his check-in form to the Shanghai and Beijing police to conduct handwriting samples and comparisons. All 4 cases would be linked, and an interprovincial China-wide investigation soon began. The Shanghai police formed a special task force with the Zhejiang and Jiangxi provincial police, and although no recorded incidents happened in these provinces, the police in Jiangsu and Anhui also joined in the investigation. The police printed 12,000 copies of documents and artistic recreations of the suspect's face and distributed them to hotels, inns, train stations, police stations, and prisons all across Jiangsu. all across Jiangsu, Zhejiang and Jiangxi, and hoped someone would identify him. The case was also covered extensively by major newspapers. The killer took note of all the attention and investigations, and so he simply stopped with no more cases being reported. Despite the mobilization of thousands of police officers across Shanghai, Jiangsu, Jiangxi, Anhui, and other provinces and cities, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles, a total of thousands of visits to the public, and collecting more than 1,000 tips, none of them could be used to track down the killer. The case went cold and later unsolved. In October 1989, the lead investigator of the case, Duan Muhanyu, retired with him unable to solve what had been dubbed the 1981 serial electric shock murder case. Before he retired, he handed his thick pile of documents and case material to his colleagues and told them to personally call him if the case was ever solved. It was because of this that every year an ambitious detective would reopen the case and attempt to start a new investigation, but were never able to successfully solve the case. In the years since, copycats would appear to commit similar robbery murders using electricity, and the Shanghai police would always send investigators to look into these cases and always came back disappointed. In 1995, Duan Muhanyu passed away, and his colleague Wang Shuren retired with the same instructions to personally inform if the case was solved. This time, there was hope. Although China had yet to establish a national system, Shanghai itself had its first computer-automated fingerprint comparison system, meaning that they didn't have to spend months comparing one fingerprint against hundreds of thousands as they did in 1981. Wang was particularly invested as he was one of the officers who spent 45 days in Jilin in 2012. China's national fingerprint database had finally been established, and as the Shanghai police preserved the fingerprints from Li Jiaoyi's murder, the case was reopened yet again. A now 77-year-old Wang Shuren was brought back to attend the fingerprint comparisons as well as retelling the case to the new generation of investigators. After 31 years, the police finally got their first plausible suspect just by running the old fingerprints through the nearly created database. The fingerprint, although not a complete match, was very similar to that of a 63-year-old man named Ai Hongguang. Ai, born in 1949, was from Yingtan in the Jiangxi province. He was 32 years old in 1981 and had already been married for 8 years and had 3 children. He was discharged from the army in 1981 and worked as a tractor maintenance worker with a salary of 70 yuan a month. The police went to Yingtan on April 19, 2012, but Ai was nowhere to be found. His wife was still home, though, and the police questioned her. Due to 31 years having passed, it was essentially impossible to recall Ai's exact whereabouts, but his wife would tell the police that he would often use buying tractor parts as an excuse to leave for several days at a time. And August 26, 1981, August 26, 1980, was just such a day when he wasn't home. In fact, his wife recalled Ai saying that he was going to Zhejiang. Ai had been arrested in 1983 for the crime of theft and extortion and was given a sentence of 3 years. He was released early in 1985 due to good behavior, and after he returned home from prison, his friends, family, and neighbors said he came back a changed man. Ai was suddenly described as a silent and low-key person who spent the majority of his time fishing during his free time and the rest of his days working on his farm and doing other odd jobs like pile driving for construction sites, which eventually earned his family enough money to live modestly. The fingerprints found at the crime scene were compared several more times, and eventually they ended up being a complete match. AI was arrested at a construction site in Dongxiang and was brought to Shanghai. AI had his fingerprints taken again to be compared to the crime scenes, and despite all the time they still ended up matching. AI confessed to the attempted murder of Feng Shaoan, as well as the two murders in Shangrao and Zhujiang, but until being shown the evidence against him, he denied the murder of Li Jiahui specifically. AI only confessed to Li's murder after being shown the fingerprint evidence and AI's handwriting samples matching the check-in forms. AI told the police that he was not satisfied with his paltry salary of 70 yuan a month, and his family wasn't able to live off it either. In 2023, that is worth $9. So using the knowledge he had accumulated while in the military, he formulated accumulated I plan .day. Then we see when there .territories. After getting some forged letters of introduction and hookah documents from friends and petty criminals, he knew back then in China citizens weren't allowed to freely travel or leave their villages without permission. He boarded a train to Shanghai on August 3, 1981. When he arrived in the city, he checked into room 42 of Jianhua Hotel that night under the name of Li Yiqing. While in the city, he used some of the money he saved up to purchase wires, insulation tape, and other tools from a nearby hardware store, and bought a watermelon knife and a woman's headband from another grocery store. Using the mechanical and electrical knowledge he learned from the army, he built a simple electric shock device with wires and a headband, and the watermelon knife was used in case the electric shock device failed to kill his victim. AI said that he was inspired by electrofashing. He stayed in the hotel until August 8, when Li Jiahui checked into the same room. He saw Li had an expensive imported watch on his wrist, and on that alone selected Li as his first victim. He struck up a conversation with Li, and when Li unfortunately told him that he was in the city to purchase goods, it made AI believe he had a sizable portion of money, and thus became an even more desirable target in AI's eyes. So later that night, once Li fell asleep, applied his makeshift electrocution device to Li's temple, which killed him very quickly, if not instantly. Fearing that Li was still alive, he applied the device to his body 10 more times. He then looted Li's body and hid all of his belongings in the AC unit before fleeing. He then told the police about his attempt on Feng Shaoan's life and the murders in Shangrao and Zhujiang. He told the police a very similar story to Li Jiahui's death. He told the police that, after stealing the victims' belongings, he sold them half price at various markets and used the money on his family. AI's wife had a habit of keeping accounts, family income and expenditure books at her home, and miraculously 31 years later, she still had them. The police spent hours poring over her books after the 3 murders. It was written that the family received 200 yuan in what was described as working income. A told the police that he felt remorse for his crimes and was even a little bit relieved when the police finally arrested him. He told the police that he frequently suffered from nightmares of the 3 men he killed, and his wife told police that he would often wake up shouting in the night, but would never give a truthful answer when she asked what was wrong. AI's trial began at the Shanghai Second Intermediate People's Court in May 2013. In court, he retracted his confessions and only confessed to attempting to kill Feng Shaoan. The prosecutor in the case showed video footage of AI confessing to the police, his wife's accounting books, and the handwriting and fingerprint matches. AI told the court that the police had tortured him to extract a confession. The prosecution countered this claim by showing unedited video footage of his interrogation and AI's medical examinations showing no signs of torture. Witnesses were also called and shown pictures of a younger AI and samples of his speech, and all positively identified him as the other guests. On November 1st, 2013, AI was sentenced to death with 2 years reprieve, meaning that if during those 2 years he worked in prison, performed deeds of merit, behaved well, exposed other people's crimes, or was found not to have committed any other at the time unsolved crimes, his sentence would automatically be reduced to life after those 2 years. AI did not appeal and said he accepted the verdict. Those 2 years passed, and his sentence was commuted to life. AI is still serving that sentence today. Rain taps slowly as we move towards the nest tail. In the quiet suburbs of Texas, a 17-year-old runaway and his classmate turned a peaceful fishing trip into a slaughter, firing 40 bullets into 3 unsuspecting men and burying a secret that would haunt academia decades later. Paul Eric Kruger, born around 1948 in California, grew up in a life of privilege as the son of a wealthy industrialist and scientist, but his path veered into darkness early on. Raised in an environment where his father's success cast a long shadow, Kruger attended a boarding school in Texas, a place meant to instill discipline in troubled teens. By 1965, at 17, he was already showing signs of rebellion, restless, armed with fantasies of adventure, and influenced by the era's pulp stories of mercenaries and soldiers of fortune. His descent into murder began with a runaway plan hatched with his 16-year-old classmate and accomplice, John Angles, a fellow student at the school. The 2 boys, carrying firearms and camping gear, fled with dreams of traveling to Venezuela to become hired guns. On April 12, 1965, while hitchhiking along the Intracoastal Waterway south of Corpus Christi, they encountered 3 fishermen. John D. Fisherman, John D. Fox, 38, Noel D. Little, 50, and Van D. Carson, 40. The men, enjoying a quiet outing on the water, had no idea they were about to cross paths with killers. Kruger and Angles rented a boat from a local marina, possibly under false pretenses, and approached the fisherman's vessel. What started as an interaction, perhaps a request for help or directions, escalated into violence without clear motive. Kruger, the primary shooter, unleashed a barrage of 40 bullets from a pair of rifles, methodically targeting the men as they pleaded or tried to flee. The explicit chaos unfolded on the waterway. Bullets ripped through flesh, shattering bones and spraying blood across the boat's deck. The victim's screams drowned by the gunfire's echo. Falk, Little, and Carson slumped lifeless, their bodies mangled by the relentless assault. Wounds to heads, chests, and limbs, leaving them unrecognizable. The boys' fantasy turned real in that moment, driven by a mix of thrill-seeking robbery, though little was taken, and perhaps a desire to prove their ruthlessness. Angles, while not the shooter, was complicit, helping with the boat and escape, his presence enabling the slaughter. What made Kruger's crimes unforgettable was the grotesque overkill and lack of remorse, a signature of youthful impulsivity fused with calculated escape. The 3 fishermen were not just killed, they were obliterated, 40 bullets fired in a frenzy, each shot puncturing vital organs, causing immediate hemorrhaging and shock. Fox might have been hit first, his body jerking as rounds tore through his torso, blood bubbling from his mouth. Little and Carson fell next, their attempts to shield themselves futile against the barrage, limbs twitching in death throes as the waterway turned red. The scene on the boat was a bloodbath. Casings scattered, the air thick with gunpowder and coppery blood. Bodies slumped in pools of viscera. Kruger and Angles didn't flee immediately. They ensured no survivors, perhaps rummaging for valuables, before abandoning the vessel. This signature wasn't random violence, but a deliberate act of domination. The boy's soldier of fortune delusion manifesting in explicit carnage. Kruger later claimed no memory of the attack when questioned in 2003, a convenient amnesia that echoed his lifelong pattern of evasion. The murders lacked sexual or ritualistic elements, but were marked by the sheer volume of gunfire, suggesting a thrill in the act itself. Angles, as the accomplice, shared in this, his role in procuring the boat and aiding the getaway, making him equally culpable under Texas law. Kruger and Angles were masters of short-term evasion, relying on youth, luck, and the vast Texas landscape to delay capture. After the murders, they ditched the boat and hitchhiked away, blending into the transient crowd along the coast. Corpus Christi police discovered the bodies the next day, April 13, 1965, launching a manhunt for two young suspects described by the marina owner. Kruger and Angles made it to nearby towns, but their inexperience betrayed them. Kruger's father's influence led to quick tips from the boarding school. Arrested within days, Kruger confessed but minimized his role, claiming the shootings were spontaneous. Angles, too, was detained, his statements aligning with Kruger's. Their evasion was brief, but Kruger's family wealth ensured top legal representation, turning a potential death penalty case into life sentence. Kruger pleaded guilty in 1966 to 3 counts of murder, with malice aforethought, receiving 3 concurrent life terms in Nueces County Court. Angles, as the minor accomplice, likely faced similar charges, but details on his trial are scarce. Sources indicate he was convicted as a juvenile or accessory, serving time in Texas youth facilities. Post-conviction, Kruger's evasion shifted to rehabilitation. He became a model prisoner, earning privileges and parole support. Paroled in 1979, after 13 years by Governor Dolph Briscoe, Kruger rebuilt his life, earning doctoral degrees and working in academia and corporations, his expunged record hiding his past. Angles faded into obscurity. No public records detail his post-release life, suggesting he changed names or lived quietly, evading the spotlight that later engulfed Kruger. The capture, or rather exposure, of Kruger came not from new evidence, but from a 2003 journalistic revelation, while Angles remains a ghost in the narrative. The murders stayed buried until July 26, 2003, when the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette published an article revealing Kruger's past as a Penn State assistant professor, Doré. Penn State officials, unaware during his 1999 hiring, learned of his conviction through a delayed parole notification from Texas 4 years late. The story detailed Kruger's 1966 conviction, his parole, and his claim of no memory when confronted. Kruger vanished from public view after the article, resigning from Penn State and reportedly moving to teach at National University in California, though they too were unaware. In a 2003 email to the Post-Gazette, he provided his CV, but offered no comment. The exposure sparked outrage, with victims' families like John Fox's relatives expressing shock at his freedom and academic career. Angles' fate is even more elusive. Contemporary reports name him as Kruger's 16-year-old classmate, but no follow-up exists. Likely paroled earlier due to his age, Angles may have reintegrated anonymously, perhaps changing his name to escape association. No arrests or public records link him to further crimes, suggesting he evaded notoriety altogether. The case's unraveling highlighted systemic flaws. No background checks for faculty, expunged records, and delayed notifications, allowing Kruger to teach unsuspecting students. Kruger's final fate is one of obscurity and denial, while Angles disappears entirely from history. After the 2003 exposure, Kruger left Penn State, briefly contracted at National University before they learned of his past. He claimed no memory of the attack, a defense echoed in interviews where he described rehabilitation in glowing terms. Kruger resurfaced in academic circles, teaching at Augustana College in South Dakota from 1994 to 1999, where colleagues were thunderstruck by revelations. By the 2000s, he vanished from public records, likely retiring or living privately. His life sentence reduced to 13 years, allowing a second chance many deemed. Angles, convicted as an accessory or juvenile murderer, served less time, perhaps in reform school, and faded away. No obituaries, arrests, or mentions suggest he lived quietly or died young. The fishermen's families found no closure. Kruger's parole in 1979, supported by Texas Corrections Director W.J. Estelle as preventing a downhill slide, ignored their pain. Relief comes from Kruger's exposure ending his academic career. But unease lingers. What became of Angles, and how many like Kruger teach in anonymity? Corpus Christi's waterway whispers of forgotten accomplices. As rain falls softly, the boat's deck bloodstains fade, bullets echo silence. But another runaway stirs, a classmate's whisper tempting fate. On December 20th, 2013, John Chakalos, an 87-year-old real estate magnate worth nearly $50 million, was found dead in his Windsor, Connecticut home, shot twice in the head and once in the stomach with a Sig Sauer rifle. 3 years later, on September 18, 2016, his daughter, Linda Carmen, 54, vanished at sea during a fishing trip off Rhode Island with her son, Nathan Carmen, then 22. Nathan, the prime suspect in both cases, was accused of orchestrating these killings to secure a massive inheritance from his grandfather's estate. The explicit brutality of Chakalos' murder and the chilling mystery of Linda's disappearance, coupled with Nathan's calculated cover-up, paint a portrait of a troubled young man driven by greed, mental instability, and a fractured family dynamic. His death by suicide in 2023, while awaiting trial, left the case unresolved. But the evidence, DNA ballistics, witness account, and Nathan's own contradictory statements, points to a chilling scheme that shocked New England and exposed the dark underbelly of a wealthy dynasty. The signature of these crimes lies in their cold, calculated execution, masked by Nathan's seemingly innocuous persona. On the night of December 19, 2013, Nathan, then 19, dined with his grandfather at a Greek restaurant on the Berlin Turnpike in Newington, Connecticut. Chakalos, a widower who amassed his fortune building nursing homes, doted on Nathan, his first male grandson, showering him with money and attention despite Nathan's struggles with Asperger's syndrome. They returned to Chakalos' home on Overlook Drive by 8:30 p.m., where Nathan allegedly lingered until his grandfather's lover called, interrupting their conversation. After a brief goodbye, Nathan left, or so he claimed. Hours later, around 3 a.m., Chakalos was shot in his sleep, the rifle blast shattering his skull and abdomen, blood soaking the king-size bed. The scene was gruesome. Brain matter splattered on the headboard. The body slumped in a pool of crimson. No valuables were taken, suggesting a personal motive. Nathan, the last person to see Chakalos alive, purchased a Sig Sauer rifle weeks earlier in New Hampshire, but told police he lost it. a claim investigators found implausible. He also discarded his computer hard drive and truck's GPS unit, erasing potential evidence of his movements that night. The second crime, Linda Carmen's disappearance, was equally sinister. On September 17, 2016, Nathan, now 22, invited his mother, Linda, for a fishing trip on his 31-foot boat, Chickenpox, departing from Ram Point Marina in South Kingstown, Rhode Island. Linda, who rarely fished and feared the water, joined to bond with her son, from whom she was estranged after her divorce from Clark Carmen. Prosecutors allege Nathan tampered with the boat, removing bulkheads and drilling holes in the transom, ensuring it would sink. Around midnight, the vessel began taking on water off Block Island. Nathan claimed he was fixing a mechanical issue when the boat capsized, leaving him in a life raft with emergency supplies, but without Linda, whose body was never found. The explicit horror lies in the premeditation. Nathan allegedly left his mother to drown, her screams swallowed by the Atlantic as the boat sank. He was rescued 8 days later, 100 nautical miles off Martha's Vineyard, by a Chinese freighter, the Orient Lucky. His account, claiming he didn't see or hear Linda after the boat gave way, was riddled with inconsistency. Oceanographer Richard Limeburner testified that Nathan's claim of drifting eastward contradicted ocean currents, which would have carried him west. Nathan's prompt filing of an $85,000 insurance claim for the boat further raised suspicions of a planned sinking. Nathan's interrogations, particularly after Linda's disappearance, revealed a calculated attempt to deflect guilt. In 2016, South Kingstown Police Deputy Chief Alfred Bucko interviewed Nathan shortly after his rescue. An audio recording later aired by ABC's 2020. Nathan, calm and composed, described grabbing emergency gear as the boat flooded, insisting he told Linda to reel in fishing lines before the vessel sank. He claimed he didn't see her in the water, despite their proximity, and failed to activate the boat's emergency beacon, saying it was too late. Detectives pressed him on the boat's condition, noting a witness, Mikey Oddsey, saw Nathan drilling holes in the transom hours before departure, compromising the vessel's stability. Nathan dismissed this, claiming he was removing unnecessary trim tabs. His demeanor, detached, almost rehearsed, clashed with the gravity of losing his mother. In 2013, Windsor police questioned Nathan about Chakalaw's murder, focusing on his rifle purchase and missing GPS. He admitted buying the Sig Sauer for protection, but claimed it vanished, refusing to elaborate and invoking his Fifth Amendment right. His alibi for the night of the murder had a 1-hour gap, unaccounted for, when he claimed to be driving to meet Linda for a fishing trip, but got lost. The explicit destruction of evidence, his hard drive and GP, suggested a cover-up, while ballistics confirmed the murder weapon matched the rifle he owned. In 2022, federal prosecutors in Vermont interrogated Nathan again after his indictment for Linda's murder and fraud. They presented damning evidence: the rifle purchase, the boat's tampering, and a text from Linda to a family member, uncovered by attorney Martin Manella, threatening to blow her father's F-ing head off, though not taken seriously. Nathan maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a grieving son and grandson, but his contradictions, claiming ignorance of the boat's defects, yet admitting to repairs, weakened his defense. The interrogation's intensity, with prosecutors detailing the rifle shots and Linda's likely drowning, reportedly left Nathan visibly shaken, though he stuck to his denial. Nathan evaded justice for years due to investigative gaps and lack of physical evidence. In 2013, Windsor police drafted an arrest warrant for Chakalov's murder, but a state prosecutor declined to sign it, citing insufficient evidence without the murder weapon or GPS data. The absence of a body in Linda's case further complicated charges, as prosecutors needed to prove murder without remains. Nathan's inheritance of $550,000 from Chakalov's bank accounts allowed him to relocate to Vernon, Vermont in 2014, where he lived unemployed, burning through funds. His aunts, Charlene Gallagher, Valerie Santilli, and Elaine Chakalos, suspected him from the start, filing a 2017 lawsuit to block his access to the $7 million trust fund tied to Linda's share. They pointed to his history of mental instability and a neighbor's claim that Nathan was a time bomb. A 2014 search of his Middletown apartment uncovered a tactical shotgun, ammunition, and notes on sniper rifles and explosives, but no Sig Sauer, allowing him to slip through. The insurance claim denial in 2019, after a judge ruled Nathan's boat repairs were faulty, bolstered suspicions, but didn't lead to immediate charges. Only in 2022, after a federal grand jury indictment, was Nathan arrested for Linda's murder and fraud, with Chakalov's killing cited as part of the scheme, but not charged due to jurisdictional limits. Nathan's trial, set for October 2023, never occurred. On June 15, 2023, he died by suicide in his cell at Cheshire County Corrections in Keene, New Hampshire, leaving a note whose contents remain undisclosed. He faced 8 counts: first-degree murder for Linda's death and multiple fraud charges for misrepresenting the boat sinking and Chakalov's estate. The prosecution's case, detailed in a May 2022 indictment, alleged Nathan killed Chakalov's to access $550,000, then murdered Linda when funds dwindled, aiming for her $7. Evidence included the rifle purchase, boat tampering, and intercepted family disputes over the trust. A key witness, Joy Washburn, caretaker of Chakalov's New Hampshire estate, told author Casey Sherman a family associate offered her $10,000 to kill Chakalov's in a staged hunting accident weeks before his death, a claim the FBI deemed credible but unlinked to Nathan. The explicit violence, Chakalov's head blown apart, Linda's likely struggle as water filled her lungs, haunted the case. Nathan's aunts attended his funeral, calling him a troubled soul, but believed he killed both victims. The estate remains in probate, with no inheritance distributed. As of August 15, 2025, Chakalov's murder remains unsolved, though Windsor police keep the case active. Linda's death, classified as murder, lacks closure without her butt. The case, covered by People, ABC News, and Sherman's Blood in the Water, 2025, exposed a family fractured by wealth and Nathan's enigmatic nature, both victim of his Asperger's and villain in his alleged greed. Relief comes from his aunt's efforts to block his inheritance, but unease persists. How many secrets died with Nathan? The Atlantic's depths and Windsor's blood-stained bedroom hold truths forever lost. As rain falls softly, a life raft drifts empty, and a mansion's silence hides a killer's step. Another fortune waits, tempting betrayal. In the shadow of Montana's Fort Peck Indian Reservation, James Allen Red Dog, a Sioux and Assiniboine man, born February 1st of 1954, carved a path of destruction that ended with his execution on March 3rd, 1993. Leaving a trail of blood and legislative reform in his wake, Red Dog's descent into crime began in the grinding poverty of the Fort Peck Reservation in Poplar, Montana, where opportunities were as scarce as hope. Born to a struggling family, his Dakota and Assiniboine heritage shaped a childhood marked by systemic hardship, unemployment, historical trauma, and a lack of resources plagued the reservation. At age 8 or 10, Red Dog idolized an older half-brother, a criminal serving time in federal prison by 1993, whose lawless lifestyle became a warped blueprint for young James. Mimicking his brother, Red Dog's first serious crime came at 19 in 1973, when he, Stephen Wayne Lilly, and Ralph James Clancy robbed a pizza parlor and liquor store on the reservation. During the heist, William Clark Besseth, 39, the owner, was shot dead, blood pooling on the floor, his body slumping as the trio fled. Red Dog, though not the shooter, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and robbery, sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, a lenient verdict that dodged the felony murder rule. His claim of innocence crumbled when he admitted firing the fatal shot at Lilly's retrial, protected by double jeopardy. This descent wasn't mere youthful folly. It was a deliberate step into violence, fueled by a need to emulate his brother and escape the reservation's despair. What made Red Dog's crimes unforgettable was their relentless brutality and calculated opportunism, a signature of a man who called himself a Terminator. In 1977, while on furlough to attend a Native American ceremony, Red Dog escaped with inmate Raymond Tapaha, fleeing to Los Angeles. There they met Stanley Large Jr. and Moses Alex John, Native American men who offered them shelter after a night of drinking in a bar. As the men slept, Red Dog and Tapaha stabbed them to death, blades piercing flesh, blood-soaking sheets, their bodies left lifeless in the dark. The explicit savagery didn't end there. They abducted Levi Aragon, sexually assaulting him in a harrowing ordeal from which he narrowly escaped to alert police. Red Dog pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder, receiving a life sentence concurrent with his robbery term, a judicial oversight that baffled prosecutors. No additional time for the murders. In 1983, while in an Illinois prison, Red Dog's violence continued. Aligned with the American Indian movement and linked to the Mexican Mafia, he supplied heroin to forcibly overdose Joseph Ortega, a gang member who had crossed others. The act was cold. Ortega's body convulsed, foam at the mouth, as the drug stopped his heart. Red Dog's cooperation with authorities, testifying against prison gangs, earned him entry into the Federal Witness Protection Program and parole on June 27, 1990. Relocated to Delaware with his wife, Bonnie, a secretary, Red Dog taught Sioux traditions to the Nanticoke Indians, masking his path. But on February 9, 1991, after drinking heavily, he targeted Hugh Pennington, a 30-year-old motel night auditor and friend of Bonnie's at the Tally Ho Motor Lot. Enraged by a very minor slight, Red Dog broke into Pennington's New Castle County home, accosting him in the kitchen. He forced Pennington, in pajamas, to the basement workshop, binding his wrists and ankles with duct tape and electrical cord. Removing his boots to avoid bloodstains, Red Dog slit Pennington's throat with a knife, the 6-inch wound nearly decapitating him, blood gushing, pooling around the body as Pennington's life drained away. The explicit violence was a hallmark. Calculated, personal, and excessive, driven by alcohol and a warped sense of retribution. Red Dog's evasion was a masterclass in exploiting systemic flaws and his own cunning. After killing Pennington, he returned home with a whiskey bottle, luring Ailsa Pennington, Hugh's 52-year-old mother, with a lie about a van in a ditch. At her home, he admitted Hugh was tied up, then took her to the master bedroom at knife point, tying her to the bed with clothesline. Over 12 hours, he raped her 4 times. Her body bruised, wrists chafed, the trauma etched in her strained voice when she called her employer. Ailsa's escape came when Red Dog drove her to a Sussex County farmhouse, raped her again, and left her with a rifle and knife in a car while he used a phone. She fled, alerting police. Red Dog ran, smearing himself with deer feces to evade dogs, but was caught 4 days later on Winchester Bridge, 100 miles away, reeking and haggard, his fingerprints on duct tape, hair in the bedrooms, and bloody footprints tied him to the scene. The 1977 escape relied on lax furlough, oversight, and his 1990 release exposed the Witness Protection Program's failure to notify Delaware authorities, a gap that led to then-Senator Joe Biden's legislation mandating such notifications. Red Dog's ability to blend into communities, teaching Sioux traditions while hiding his past, kept him free until Ailsa's escape. The unmasking came swiftly, driven by forensic evidence and Red Dog's own admissions. Arrested February 13, 1991. He faced a 9-count indictment: first-degree murder, kidnapping, 4 counts of unlawful sexual intercourse, and 2 weapons charges. Pleading no contest, claiming drunken amnesia, Red Dog left a damning note to Bonnie. "I went crazy last night and killed Hugh." The bloody fingerprint, hair consistent with his, and Ailsa's testimony sealed his fate. At trial, he demanded the death penalty, invoking a warrior's code inspired by ancestral braves. His lawyer, Edward Pankowski, tried to appeal, but Red Dog refused, sparing the Pennington family a trial. The Delaware Superior Court, under Judge Norman A. Barron, upheld his competency, rejecting psychiatric tests. His sisters praised his choice, claiming it saved taxpayer money, though prosecutors saw no motive beyond his self-described urge to hurt people. Red Dog's final fate was execution by lethal injection at Delaware's State Correctional Center in Smyrna on March 3, 1993, at age 39. His last meal, shrimp, crab, and lobster from Bailey's, was a feast he guarded fiercely, stabbing Pankowski's hand with a plastic fork when he reached for lobster, growling, "I'm a rapist, a 5-time killer, and a Sioux without a soul." A tribal medicine man, John H. Morset, performed a 2-minute Sioux rite, placing a necklace on Red Dog, who thanked his wife, Pankowski, and supporters, but told witnesses, "The rest of you can kiss my ass." As drugs flowed, he choked, saying to Bonnie, "I'm going home, babe," dying with his left eye open at 10:28 a.m. His body was sent to Wolf Point, Montana, for burial. The Pennington family found closure, but unease lingers. Systemic failures let Red Dog kill again. Biden's law aimed to prevent such oversights, yet the reservation's poverty and Red Dog's Terminator ethos haunt his legacy. As rain falls softly, the basement's bloodstains fade, a warrior's death claimed, but another fugitive stirs, hiding in plain sight,